All right, welcome everyone. We're going to get started. Welcome to Cache Valley Counseling's Max Group. I'm going to start by reading my little spiel here and then get started. So I need to say that this is not therapy and is a group of people coping with a variety of presenting problems. Information discussed and shared in this group is intended to support the therapeutic process and increase readiness for change. If you are feeling suicidal, or are having life-threatening thoughts, this group is not a place to discuss those. Please consider calling 988, getting in touch with your therapist as soon as possible, or reaching out to a loved one to help you access additional resources if needed. I want you to know that we are recording this video or this session, and it will be available on our YouTube channel for you to rewatch at any point. Do this if you aren't comfortable turning your camera on, that's okay. If you would like to change your name on Zoom profile, you can do that as well. With all of that being said, groups are more powerful when we learn from each other and can share our experiences. So with that out of the way, let me introduce my topic. Well, I'll introduce myself a little bit and then the topic from there. So my name is Spencer Dutson. I am a licensed marriage and family therapist working here at Cache Valley Counseling. And I love my job as a therapist. I feel very fortunate that I can work here. The topic that I'm going to be covering today, I've titled Mindfulness in Relationships, How Slowing Down Helps Us Speed Up. So before we get into this, I wanted to kind of just like give you a brief introduction to my experiences with mindfulness and meditation and what that means for me and why I'm passionate about this in the context of our relationships. Now, I'm like I said, a marriage and family therapist. So my training is in relational therapy. And then I also specialize in couples therapy. And so I like to think that I know what I'm talking about with that. And with mindfulness and meditation, I have a lot of experience in my own personal life and a lot that I've been able to use in my therapy with clients as well. So my journey with mindfulness really began in my undergrad. I had the opportunity to work as what was called a reach peer at the time, where basically I worked with people who were in counseling at the university. I would work with their clients to teach them basic skills training stuff. So like I would teach them deep breathing or skill like time management or mindfulness and meditation, just different like strategies or coping techniques like that. And when I was doing that, I felt very quickly drawn to mindfulness and meditation as a thing that can be very helpful for people. Um, and started practicing it myself and was just like, oh, this is like so cool to like kind of experience the process of slowing down, noticing my internal workings, and noticing that how with consistency, it became like that much easier to like show up how I wanted to show up in my day-to-day life instead of letting anxiety control me or letting like my own reactions like control me. And so that was back in 2015, no 2016 when I started into that, and I've really been doing mindfulness and meditation ever since then. Just to kind of like provide a little bit of a framework here, the difference between mindfulness and meditation is like not that big. Look at mindfulness as like a big, broad thing, and meditation is like a thing that fits underneath that broad thing of mindfulness. Really, mindfulness is just noticing our five senses, and meditation is a much more structured or specific practice that has lots of different like methods, if you will, a lot of different schools of meditation, ranging from like guided meditation where someone's like kind of telling you what to think or what to focus on, to the other extreme, which is more of what's called open meditation, where you're just noticing your thoughts, trying to anchor yourself to your breath or a mantra or something like that. And of course, mindfulness and meditation has its roots in the eastern parts of the world. And there's a ton of research on mindfulness and meditation, how powerful it can be. But anyways, that's just a brief overview, okay? Now, I will say that during my presentation here, as I'm talking, if you have any questions or comments, please feel free to just like enter those in the chat and I'll get to those. Otherwise, at the end, I'll provide some space for questions if anyone has any. So with that said, the first thing I wanted to start talking about actually is a concept that I feel I see time and time again in my office. And I hope this comes across in the right way. I don't mean to say this in like a pessimistic kind of way, but just more of an observation, okay? And it's this: people are generally self-centered. I'm just gonna let that land for a second. People are generally self-centered. Now, I don't say that to mean that people are selfish. That's not what I'm saying at all. I'm saying we are self-centered, me included, guys. We're self-centered, and what I mean by that is that we tend to focus on ourselves before other people. Now, that doesn't mean that we think about ourselves above other people all the time, but we do think about ourselves before other people, generally speaking, okay? And this, from like a very biological standpoint, makes sense because if I'm dead, then nothing else matters, right? And so my basic needs need to be taken care of, and my basic sense of self needs to be taken care of as well, right? So that's the first observation that I'll give, okay, is that generally speaking, people are self-centered. Now, the other thing, though, that I'll make, the other statement I'll make is that we need connection, specifically connection with other people. Okay. And it's also important for our survival to have this connection with others. When I work with people, one of the things I'll often give them as an example of why connection is so important from like a, again, biological standpoint, if you will, is imagine with me that you are with a group of people in the wilderness somewhere, right? Let's say you're going backpacking somewhere and you happen to get just off trail a little bit and all of a sudden you're by yourself and you're lost and they don't know where you are, okay? And let's say that in that scenario, you happen to roll your ankle. Okay. You don't break anything, but you roll your ankle to the point where you can like hardly walk. Like it's a pretty bad sprain or something. And it really limits your mobility. Well, that little injury could be life threatening in that scenario and in that circumstance, right? Because who's going to like help you get food if you don't have any? Who's going to help you? Like, how are you going to provide for your shelter and stuff like that? How are you going to hike out of there? Like, something as small as that can very quickly become a bad thing, right? And so our nervous system and our biology sends protective signals and like goes through like a fight, flight, freeze response kind of deal when we are alone or when we're separated from a group as a way to encourage survival. Okay. So again, we need connection. This isn't some like fluffy therapist statement here. We genuinely need connection. Now, compare these two thoughts then that I just shared. Okay. On the one hand, that people are generally self-centered. Again, not selfish, but self-centered, meaning they focus on themselves, but that we also need connection. These two survival instincts, if you will, are really at odds with each other, aren't they? And I would invite you to kind of reflect on your own relationships and just notice how you like value connection, you value relationships, but also taking an honest look at yourself and noticing how your own self-centeredness and however that shows up impacts all sorts of things regarding your relationship. Okay. Now, this self-centeredness, I'll say right now, is really hard, I think, for us to be honest about with ourselves and with other people. Because generally speaking, most of us have a pretty good, like pretty positive regard for ourselves. Meaning we kind of think highly of ourselves for the most part, right? And so to honestly look at yourself and be like, am I self-centered? Like, do I let myself or my needs become more important than the people around me? And while you may not say yes to that always, I would encourage you to, again, be honest with yourself in terms of how much that impacts things, right? And so my solution, if you will, if I could even call it that, to kind of working through these two conflicting needs is to be able to combat the effects of self-centeredness with mindfulness and meditation. So that's the whole thing that I'm hoping that you guys kind of leave with tonight, is that we can combat the effects of self-centeredness by using mindfulness and meditation. Okay. Because again, we need connection, but our self-centeredness often gets in the way. When I'm working with a couple in my office, man, that self-centeredness and people thinking too much about themselves and not enough about their partner or spouse gets in the way every time. When I'm working with a family where we've got like a parent and a teenager, for example, focusing too much on yourself gets in the way of you seeing the bigger picture. Okay. Now, self-centeredness is not necessarily a bad thing. I'm just encouraging us to be more aware of how it shows up in our relationships to be able to then do something about it. And so this is really applicable to what I hope would be all relationships in your life. And I'm going to cover a couple of very basic like things that you can do that hopefully are pretty practical for you in this moment to be able to implement some mindfulness and meditation in your own life. Okay. So the first thing I want to teach is a very, very basic concept that you might be like, well, duh, Spencer, like that seems like a super simple thing to do. But it's one that's really hard to do in the moment and takes a lot of practice to like make it more of a habitual thing. Okay. And I call it the 3-second rule. Okay. So basically, if you're like in a relationship with someone, and again, this could be a romantic relationship, like a spousal or partner relationship, and this could be a family relationship. It could also be a friend or a coworker, okay? And you notice yourself like having a reaction in some way. The 3-second rule is you counting to 3 in your head. Now, even if you count super fast, 1, 2, 3, it's at least giving you a break before you respond that can hopefully give you enough time to really check in with yourself to see, is this how I want to be showing up right now in this moment? But ideally, we count a little bit slower, okay? And I actually encourage people to, if you can, try to take breaths with each count that you have. So for example, it might be like 1, okay, 2, and you might think the person who you're interacting with might think you're being a little bit crazy or ridiculous, right? By kind of really taking that time. But I've seen this work where it can de-escalate a conflict or an issue in a relationship so quickly because we're just slowing it down, right? So we're just breathing before we respond, right? Counting to 3, okay? So on the one hand, you can count really fast. On the other hand, you can count super slow, 1 breath with each count. Or like I said, you can kind of just take a deep breath and then count to 3 at your leisure. Okay. This is a mindfulness aspect to relationships because, again, we're forcing ourselves to slow down and notice what am I experiencing right now and why am I experiencing it so that you can choose how you want to act instead of just constantly be reacting, which is pretty common in our relationships when things go south. Okay. The next mindfulness tip, if you will, that I want to give space for is something that comes from the Gottmans. Okay, the Gottmans are relationship experts, if you will, focusing mostly on romantic relationships, but they also have some research on parenting stuff as well. And one of the things that they like to explain to the people they work with is a concept called a soft startup. Now, a soft startup is pretty self-explanatory. Basically, if you need to, express something to someone that you're in relationship with, again, could be romantic, family, coworker, friend, whatever, that's kind of like a hard thing to say, or maybe for you, it's like loaded emotionally. Well, the soft startup is finding a way that you can say it in as soft a way as possible, right? So let's say, for example, that my wife did something that upset me, right? I could come at it pretty hard and be like, I can't believe that you did that. Like, that was so rude, or that hurt my feelings so much, right? And most likely, my spouse is going to respond with her own defenses, right? And then we're off to the races, right? Her defenses are coming up and my defenses are coming up, and it just doesn't go anywhere, right? But if I can approach it from a softer starting point of like, hey, I just wanted to talk to you about like this thing that happened and how that made me feel. Like, is that something that we can talk about? Or I'd like to give space for that. Is now a good time? What that does is it primes the other person to not have their defenses come online as quickly. This is by no means a guarantee. And if you're struggling significantly in like a romantic relationship or a familial relationship, maybe consider getting some additional help with a therapist trained to work with that stuff. Because again, once it happens, it can get away really quickly, right? But this soft startup is a mindfulness concept in my mind, because again, you're slowing yourself down before you even get started, right? You're aware of what am I feeling? What am I experiencing? And can I bring this up in a soft and gentle way, at least striving to? And the cool thing about mindfulness and meditation in the context of our relationships is that the more you do it, the more likely your spouse, partner, friend, coworker is going to respond in like manner, which is really cool in my mind. It's kind of like synergistic, if that makes sense, right? I respond cool, calm, and collected. The other person is more likely to do so as well. Now, again, no guarantees here, but just something that can work. Okay. So those two concepts, the 3-second rule and the soft startup, are the two concepts related to mindfulness that I felt were most applicable to relationships. Now, at this point, you might be wondering, okay, Spencer, but why did you say, or why did you give the title of how slowing down helps us speed up? Well, to kind of tie that in right now, most of us want solutions, right? When things don't go well in relationships, we want to like fix it immediately. But usually it's our efforts to fix it that it actually gets worse. At least that's what I see in my own relationships and in the couples or families that I work with in my therapy office. Okay. And so by slowing down, by being more mindful of ourselves and of our spouse, partner, friend, whoever, we actually are going to be more likely to speed up the resolution of said conflict or issue than if we were to just like steamroll ahead. Okay. And so that's why this really makes it faster. It's kind of like a paradox, right? Slow down to go faster, but it's true, right? Um, I didn't mention this, but I'm really big into mountain biking. And so like right now it's like winter, and so I shed a little bit of tears every night because I can't go mountain biking anytime soon. But with mountain biking, right, there might be a tendency to go really fast downhill, but there's a threshold, right? You go too fast, you're more likely to crash, do things unsafe. And so going slower or slow enough actually makes it more likely that you'll go faster. Because if I crash my bike and have to get back on the bike, that's going to significantly slow down my time, right? Compared to no crashes, no accidents, that kind of thing. And so I hope the same for your relationships, right? By slowing down, we can speed things up. Now, this mindfulness stuff, again, like can be really hard to do because we're so primed to react, especially when it's been happening habitually, right? And so please don't take any of this as like, oh, well, that sounds great, but that's unrealistic, right? Because these things can help, but they're not the golden ticket, so to speak, or the silver bullet, right? What I think can make a bigger impact, if you will, is a consistent practice with being mindful and meditating to be aware of our own internal workings. So let's talk about meditation a little bit and let's practice something that we can do as it relates to our relationships. Okay. So again, meditation, like I said, has a lot of different specific practices, but I wanted to go over a specific meditative practice right now that's called loving kindness. Okay. Now, loving kindness, if you like Google it or look up other like ways of how to do this, is a pretty specific and almost like a regimen type of meditation. And what I'm going to be suggesting tonight is much simpler and can just help you to be, again, slowing yourself down more consistently while also setting an intention of how you want to interact with the person that you're struggling with. Okay. So wherever you're at, you can close your eyes for this or you can keep them open, whatever helps you feel like kind of most in the moment. Okay. But the first thing I want you to do is identify a person whom you are having like a little bit of conflict with, or maybe have a hard time with um, in your life. Okay. Anyone, but pick someone that's like not like the worst conflict in your life, right? Like if you're estranged from someone, like don't pick them, but maybe pick someone that's a little bit less distressing or less big, if you will, as we practice this. And then if you get like used to practicing it, you can try up in the ante, so to speak. Okay. But pick a person through which you have some conflict with, or that can happen occasionally. If you're in a romantic relationship, you could use your partner or spouse. Again, just hopefully it's not like a huge, big, a lot of conflict right now, because this might be hard to engage in. So pick someone that feels reasonable for you. After having picked that person, I want you to now pick a statement that's something you wish for that other person to have. Okay. And this is where we're setting that intention, right? But pick something that you wish they could have that's kind of like more core to human experience. So for example, your statement might be like, let's say that the person's name is John, right? You might say, may John have peace. Maybe you want them to have more peace, right? That's something that you wish they could have. You long for them to have that. Maybe it's you want them to be strong. So you might say, may John have strength. Or maybe it's may John have love, right? So again, it's something that you're imagining and kind of intentionally sending to them, okay? Then what we do, okay, is we're going to basically, again, you can close your eyes or keep them open, but you're going to repeat this phrase in your mind basically over and over again for a period of a few minutes, okay? So again, to make this real, I'm going to have us practice it right now, okay? So I'm going to set a timer over here on my phone that will go off in, let's just start with 2 minutes, okay? 2 minutes may seem like not that long of a time, but I promise you, as you're like doing this, you might be like, man, 2 minutes feels like a long time. But to be clear, what we're doing is we're just repeating that phrase of loving kindness that you're wanting that person to have in your mind and just only repeating that, okay? So this is like a introduction to my meditation 101. And so if this doesn't feel like great, that's okay. You can keep practicing. But basically, you're going to repeat that phrase in your mind over these 2 minutes over and over again. Just gently, okay? Don't be like hard about it, okay? Just like gently say it in your mind. If you notice yourself getting distracted or something is like coming up for you, like you're thinking about what you're going to eat later, or you're thinking about work tomorrow, or you're thinking about getting the kids ready for bed, whatever that thing might be, that's okay. Just notice that and then bring yourself back to that statement that you're trying to repeat. Okay. May that person have fill in the blank. Okay. So I'm just going to mute myself over here and set the timer now. So again, pick your person, pick your phrase, and allow yourself to just repeat this thing over the next 2 minutes. So whenever you end something like this, I always encourage people to just like take a deep breath, come back to the room where you're at. Now, if you have no experience with meditation, again, that might feel really weird to you to like sit and kind of repeat a phrase like that in your mind. But the phrase that you're repeating, I want to emphasize it's doing two things mainly. Okay. The first thing is, like I said earlier, it's challenging that self-centeredness that can be the bane of our relationships, right? Because what you're doing is you're really intentionally thinking about the other person and what you wish they could have, something positive, right? Now, obviously, if you pick something like, I wish they would be nice to me or something like that, you're not coming at it from the right angle, right? Because it's something that we wish that they can have that's kind of like just in a way us giving that to them. Obviously, we're not giving anything to them in this practice, right? But it's like that intention of like, I wish that person could have more peace, right? That's a positive thing that I wish of everyone, and I want them to have that too. So again, it's challenging that self-centeredness, and with consistency can help us to stay out of that self-centeredness. The other thing that that phrase is doing is in meditation, it's acting as what's called a mantra. So in pop psychology, like mantras sometimes are like, I'm good enough, or I love myself, right? But really, mantras and meditation is just an anchor. It's anything that you can focus on that can be consistent to help you stay in that mindfulness place. Okay. So a mantra could be as simple as a single word. Okay. But in this context, it's like a sentence. So what it's doing is it's forcing you to stay present in an intention instead of letting your mind wander into all these different places. Now, the thing about meditation that I'll emphasize before I wrap up here is that even like for someone like me that's been practicing it for years, you don't get good at meditation. That's not the point. The point is not to like not have thoughts or to make your mind blank or anything. The point is the practice of getting better at just being with yourself and noticing the thoughts and not judging your thoughts and just accepting things as they are for that small chunk of time. Okay. So if you were like, man, I really struggle with that, like I couldn't do it, like it's just not for me. Well, guess what? It is for you. That's why, right? Because you're not supposed to be good at it. It's about that consistent practice. And again, how this can help us fight that self-centeredness. So I will wrap up by just saying that, this type of meditation or mindfulness is really, really powerful, but it is something that warrants consistency. Okay. The research that I've seen on meditation specifically, but mindfulness in general, seems to indicate that you have to do it consistently for everywhere is different, right? But I've seen anywhere from a couple of weeks to a couple of months to 30 days to whatever. But the key is consistency, right? Doing 2 minutes of this now is probably not going to do a lot for you in the grand scheme of things. But I would guess that if you could dedicate 2 to 5 minutes to doing a meditation like that, or practicing some of the mindfulness things I covered earlier, and you get consistent with that practice, you're going to find it easier to engage from that like more removed place where you're not so reactive so consistently. Okay. And so I hope that you all can find some value from some of these practices that we covered, and more importantly, to be able to use them to slow things down enough so you can actually speed them up, like I said earlier. Well, everyone, thank you for coming today. Thanks for bearing with me through all this, and I hope you, again, were able to find some value from this. Again, we try to hold these max groups around this same time every week, so we hope to see you again soon, and I will be ending it now. Thank you all again.